And welcome back to JKLIVE. The bench is packed tonight because of one thing and one thing alone. It's all about the BBI. Let me quickly introduce our guest. We get right down to it. Right next to me, ladies first, Priscilla Nyakabi. She's the commissioner at the National Gender and Equality Commission. Right next to her is Dr. Alex Awiti. He's vice provost of the Aga Khan University. Right next to him, Dr. Collins Odote, lecturer at the University of Nairobi. And on the far end, Charles Kanjama, advocate of the High Court. Folks, thanks so much for being on the bench tonight. Apologies for the late start. I know, Priscilla, you want to be asleep by now, right?
Sure. It's been a long day.
It's been a long day for all of you. Thanks so much for staying on. Real quick, let's get down to it. The biggest take-home, Priscilla, for you, the biggest take-home today, what was that?
I have two myself from the contents. One, the gender gains, which are quite many. And two, the gender gains in the sense of the opposite gender rule, that where you have a gubernatorial candidate who's male, the deputy is going to be female, and vice versa. And then also the two-thirds, full implementation of the two-thirds rule. But one other thing I really like was the Health Service Commission. Been in health matters for a little longer. Yeah. But I just love that the day went well, peace speeches, unity speeches, a small tiff with Murkomen, just a small tiff.
We'll get to Murkomen in a moment. Sure. Okay, Dr. Awiti, your biggest take-home?
My biggest take-home is that this turned out not to be that monster it was painted to be, and that this was a very categorical invitation for a national conversation. And the way that the issues are framed, all of 9 of them, and the encapsulation of that in terms of the essence and the agency of the moment. I think what I really like is that we're running out of time. As a country, there's an agency to institute a process of sustained national dialogue to move us beyond some of the issues that we've dealt with before. So I think it's a big tent now. It's an invitation to have a conversation. In fact, some of the dissenting voices, including Murkomen and even Ledama, basically said, well, our issues are not captured in this, but we welcome the opportunity to have a conversation, as Musalam Mudavadi put it, an invitation to interrogate the document to the fullest extent that they can, and basically tease out those issues and have a consensus process going forward.
Dr. Dote.
Thanks, Jeff. 2 quick things. The first one is just like Awiti, I was happy that the document does not prescribe solutions. It prescribes the problems. Tells us these are our problems and opens up and gives an opportunity for us to be able to debate about what the possible options are. Where possible tells you these are potential menu of options, but doesn't give you that this is the one, this is the magic one that will solve the problems. I like that. The second thing that I liked today, it was very refreshing to listen to the Minister for Foreign Affairs for Tanzania. I think for me that was, I know him personally. It was very hilarious to listen to him talk to us about things that disturb us and talk to us candidly, relaxedly, and I think sometimes firmly. That for me was extremely a good takeaway.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, he was very, he stole the show basically. Charles Kanjama, your thoughts?
So looking at the document, Jeff, I think the thing that struck me most is the determination to abandon the pure presidential model. The executive is getting back into parliament, and parliament is getting back into the executive. So I think the hybrid model that we left beaten up a bit is coming back based on the BBI proposals.
Okay, good. Priscilla, you mentioned the Murkomen moment. Was that a little, was he out of control? Did he go a little overboard, do you think? Or what are your thoughts about his presentation?
I think there was something to say about the anger. He was very angry.
Yes.
And just about political moments and how to deal with anger even when things don't go your way. And I think that they were, sort of included into the program a little later that God didn't sit well with him. But I like that after the anger moments and when PC, and he kept joking, I'm going to get my PC Bakora back on. So he got the PC Bakora back on, came back and said, let's listen to Murkomen. I like the latter part of his speech. After that, then he was controlled and he was saying the right things. But earlier on when he started, he wasn't saying the right thing. Yeah. And today, the mood was not fighting. The mood was BBI. If you went onto the podium and said things that were not on the BBI, Governor Sonko suffered more. He tried to say some things. I think people just BBI. It was just BBI. And because the tone was very reflective and uniting and a new dawn, anybody who didn't fall into that spirit today was in a bit of trouble. So I suspect Murkomen that could have affected him.
But Dr. Awiti, at the same time, it shows there's a rift. Let's not kid about it. There's a rift in Jubilee.
I guess, Jeff, it's more of the way that the process was instituted. I think the initial conversations around the handshake were probably polarizing, especially if you take a look into 2022. Many people inside Jubilee thought that the president was going back on his promise to the deputy president who would support him, and that there could be a new alliance that was emerging. And there was conversations from people like David Murade, people like Orengo, new formations and all of that stuff. So I think that polarized the initial conversations around the constitution of the Building Bridges initiative. I think what we've now seen is that vitriol is basically dissipating. And everybody's come to realize that this is not about President Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga perpetuating themselves in political leadership in the future. This is basically to open up a more consultative, consensus-driven process for political resolution of some of our most intractable problems around national cohesion, around national identity, around management of elections, around issues like corruption, shared prosperity. And I think we're basically getting back on track on those conversations.
Yeah. Dr. Odote, was Tanga obviously excluded from this? Do you think they were obviously excluded?
I am not sure about obviously excluded. But you had Senator Murkomen complain. And I think for me what's important is for us to listen to every complaint as a country and to be able to address it. Because if we want to move together, then every complaint, however small, however illegitimate, is one that requires to be listened to and to be taken into account. Because the reality, Jeff, is that we have all sinned in the eyes of the Lord. And I think it's Senator Orengo who then said, if I want to get something that is wrong about this process or about this country, there'll be many things to talk about. But if I'm looking for the ties that bind us, I need to be careful about what I say. So for me, as opposed to saying they were not, I'm much more interested in how do we ensure that everybody moving forward feels included into the process.
Charles Kanjama, when Yusuf Haji, chairman of the BBI task force, when he stepped up to the podium and told the people, hey, listen, man, let the man speak. Let him speak. Was that a moment? In your opinion, was that a moment?
I think it was interesting. There's been a major build-up to this report. There have been so many fake reports. It's like Kenyans have an industry of churning out BBI reports. As late as last night, we were still not sure whether the genuine report was the actual one that was circulating.
Right.
And so I think there was a sense of anticipation for now the breakdown of what the report actually provided. So that anticipation definitely did lead to a lot of suspense, and that suspense has now been punctured. We are able to look at the actual document itself, interrogate it, read it for ourselves, and then determine what is the way forward. And I think that really is the heart of the discussion that we should now be having. What is the way forward? And for me, what I've been reflecting on is whether this package of proposed reforms can be implemented based on the political dimension, the legal dimension, and the economic dimension. Those are the ones I've been thinking about. And legally, I think for me the concern is this package one that requires constitutional amendments that demand a referendum or not? So what is the likelihood that this package can be implemented legally based on the way the country is? Politically, of course, is a different question. Will the disparate political voices pull together in support of this package of reforms, or will we see fissures emerging? And then economically, the feeling of Kenyans that the economy is not doing very well, will that be surmounted? Will the package of reforms actually address that financial angle? So I think the financial, the political, and the legal, in terms of the way forward, that is what I'm looking at right now. And I think many people in the country are.
Yeah, Dr. Joseph, let me come to you on this one. The creation, everyone's talking about this, the creation of a prime minister post. Well, how does that change things? How does that solve our political divisiveness in this country?
Jeff, can I just talk about one thing about what Kanjama said, then I come to the prime minister? I think in terms of the political, legal, and economic consequences of implementation, if you look at the report, and I had occasion to look at it last night, because I had to, the report is very short on implementation. And I think, for me, one of the things that struck me on the first part is that the greatest problem we have is a software problem and not a hardware problem. And I think software solutions are not legal. So I think for me, as we think through the process, my personal feeling is the legal solutions of implementation should actually be the last. We should much more focus on what are the things that we can do that have less economic costs, that require less legal negotiations, but basic things, like for example saying that the 26th of December should be Culture Day as opposed to boxing, requires very little in terms of implementation if you agree, as opposed to some things like having a curriculum for parenting. The parenting challenges require very legal challenges. So if we can do that, then we'll be able to develop national momentum to do the more difficult things. That's number one. Let's come to the Prime Minister. How does this change things? I think it changes things in two ways, in my view. The first one is if you talk to colleagues in Parliament, I think the change in the structure of the executive, if you talk to guys who've been in Parliament, they say, you know, now we talk to ourselves. I think it's yesterday that we're being given a perfect example. I don't even remember where the conversation precisely was, where somebody says, you know, if you ask a question now, then the chair of the committee tells you, I have the answer from CSX. Then if you have a supplementary question, says, sorry, I will have to go back to X and get you the answer. I think the change now is that you will be able to have much more interesting conversation in Parliament, that you will have people who you can be able to hold accountable directly and who can be able to respond to you real time. That's the first thing. But the second, on a Prime Minister, I think the one thing it doesn't do, it doesn't take the people who have lost to then come and be part of government. That's not what it does. It ensures that in terms of those that have won, you're not just having the president and deputy president who sit outside Parliament. You are then having also somebody who has political clout, who essentially is then also politically responsible inside Parliament, but also coordinating government business on a day-to-day basis. So essentially, as opposed to having two people at the top, you now actually have three. That's, I think, the thing it does. And we were discussing this offline. It borrows almost from Tanzania in terms of a prime minister. So that's, I think, for me, the thing that does. The second thing that it does, it, through the back way, opens up possibilities of a coalition government.
Right.
Because the prime minister is the leader of the party with the majority in... not the leader, is a member of the party with majority in Parliament. The National Assembly. He doesn't have to be from the party that wins.
Correct.
So if he isn't, then you see you have a possibility of a coalition government. What does that do? Deals with winner takes all, but in a very nuanced manner. Yeah. So for me, those are the two things that I think it does. And if you add on to the fact that you now have also a leader of opposition, so you have a prime minister and a leader of opposition, then you see in terms of inclusivity, we're then seeing that we are represented either at the prime minister and the presidency level or at the opposition level, but all of us are serving the same government.
Feel free to jump in, any of you. Huh? Your thoughts, Priscilla?
I want to jump in myself, especially because I served in the last parliament, in the 2013-2017 parliament, and it is indeed true that parliamentarians speak to themselves because the executive is not in parliament. It was originally meant that the technocrats would be free of serving an electoral area, that they would then be able to serve the whole nation. And that was thought to be a better model then, but it hasn't worked. You look at the minister who spoke today to us, and we were just wondering, would a Kenyan minister sent to Tanzania deliver the message in the manner in which the Tanzanian minister delivered here? And the reason is because he is both a minister and a parliamentarian. So he has a lot of clout, he has political leadership, he is a future president himself, and so that's what we are looking at. And one of the things I'm personally very happy about is that it doesn't make our cabinet fully parliamentarians. It has still allowed the technocrats to come, so it's like a 50-50. In fact, the word is mixed cabinet. So you will have some cabinet ministers who are politicians and members of parliament, but you will have also technocrats come into cabinet. But once they come into cabinet, they become ex-officio members of parliament for the purposes of questioning, for oversight. And we have now also a shadow cabinet with the leader of official opposition, because the idea, the service part is competition, that if you don't do education well, the shadow minister will do education well. If you don't do health well, the shadow minister will do health well. If you don't do agriculture well, there is somebody to question. And that is really, really important for us. This lack of questioning over service delivery, over corruption, over accountability is not helping us. And when you have leaders, very strong leaders, like I can tell you the parliament I served in, we missed the services, the talent, the energy of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. I think had he been in parliament, that parliament would have been stronger. Parliament is now not very strong. So bringing back the executive looks like it might strengthen the institution of parliament. Of course, the lawyers and the politicians always have diverse views, but here, my own view with Kenya is let's have a constitution for us. It may not work in other countries. You know, we have a democracy that is only Kenyan-made because we have to deal with tribes, we have to deal with ethnicities, we have to deal with competition. So sometimes our models do not reflect what is out there, but if they work for us, why not?
Dr. Witi, you're nodding. You're nodding.
I think what Priscilla is saying is very profound, and it is also the spirit of the BBI report, which says that, look, there are all kinds of models across the world, but we need to evolve in an organic way, something that is uniquely Kenyan. It could be an experimental process, but we need to figure out a system of government that works to include the multiple diversities that we have in terms of ethnicity. But having said that, which again is really, how do we govern through consensus as a model for a public existence in a public, thoughtful space, so that it is not legalistic all the time. It doesn't have to be extremely, exorbitantly prescribed in the law, but that through consensus and dialogue we can always move forward. And I think that's what the deliberative process that joins part of the executive inside the legislature then includes, a deliberative, more accountable, in real-time process where the Prime Minister comes to answer questions. Members of Parliament are not talking to each other. Some of them are ex-officio members of Parliament by appointment into the cabinet. And what Priscilla says, it gives them that clout. It sharpens political leadership and political debate. I think that's what has been missing in our public discourse. And for many times when the President comes to deliver the State of the Nation address, he's a distant authority coming into Parliament, does his thing and leaves. And then the ordinary mortals debate and do whatever they want to do with the speech. And that's it, until the next year. So I think that aloofness basically also does not serve us well. It is an American model. It's been evolved for 220 years. It's a very different jurisdiction. The hybrid they were trying to create, which colleagues say is similar to the Tanzanian model, let's try that out. It's not the pure Westminster model, where the Prime Minister basically runs the government at the behest of the Queen, but it is a model that has the President kind of playing the role of the Queen and the symbolic head of the state, but also the substantive, authoritative head of the country and government.
But Charles, the President, correct me if I'm wrong, the President appoints the Prime Minister.
Yes, and can dismiss him for no cause.
Or her.
Yes, or her.
Yeah.
So,
I like the her part.
We'll get there.
So what's to stop? I mean, look, people are thinking, look, this Prime Minister is just a glorified minister, Charles. I mean, look, it can be hired and fired. He's hired and fired. She's hired and fired at the President's whim.
In fact, we were discussing before he came on air that in Tanzania you don't tend to have strong prime ministers. They tend to be rather subservient to the president. The president has strong personality. The president controls the party. So the prime minister tends to be the errand boy or girl of the president, and the sword of Damocles of the potential dismissal or even vote of no confidence is hanging on the prime minister. So Jeff, for me, what I would like to say is this. I think as Kenyans, we keep searching for the perfect system. And we tried the first hybrid model in our old constitution, and it did not seem to serve us well. We've tried presidential, pure presidential. It does not seem to serve us well. We want to try a new system, and I think I can predict that after we've tried it for a few years, because of our unique personality as Kenyans, it will not seem to serve us well. And yet each of those models that we are leaving behind seems to be serving a particular country somewhere else we can pick very well. So that you begin asking yourself, is the problem the structures of governance, or it is the software in the governance model? And will we reach that point where we stop chasing our tail? If it's a dog chasing its tail, you never seem to quite catch the tail. And so my concern is that the grass always seems to be greener on the other side. And maybe the problem is not the grass. I don't think the system of government will address negative ethnicity. It is a cultural issue. I think you can find negative ethnicity with parliamentary system, with presidential, with hybrid. One of the interesting parliamentary models of our next door neighbor is just north of us in Ethiopia. And until the recent change of government with the new prime minister, when you spoke to Ethiopians, there are many Ethiopians who would feel a very strong sense of exclusion from their parliamentary system of government. And in fact, you talk to them and they had lost hope in their politics. And yes, it was a parliamentary system of government. It didn't seem to be working well for them. So I think that a note of caution is in order, that we can always be looking at that pot of gold at the foot of the rainbow, but we are forgetting that the problem lies with us. And I think even as if we decide to implement a new system, we need to keep cautioning us. Finally, allow me to say that a few months ago, the Law Society of Kenya held a conference, annual conference in Mombasa in August, 9 years after the new constitution. What is the way forward? And after a lot of discussion, I guess on the same topics of do we need to amend the constitution? Is a problem that we have not implemented the constitution well? I think most of the lawyers there reached the conclusion based on the discussions we are having, if I may paraphrase Chesterton, our problem is not that we've tried the constitution and found it wanting, is that we found the constitution wanting and left it untried. And that therefore the solution probably is we need to put more effort into implementing some of the spirit of the constitution, like chapter 6 and so on integrity and leadership that we have ignored or put on a back burner.
One word answers, referendum or not? Will there be a referendum?
It's a bit of a difficult question. The report is not prescriptive enough.
Alex.
So we have to get into it when we get there.
I hope we don't get there.
Collins.
90% of the things in that document does not require a referendum.
Charles.
The core things in that document, the 10%, they do require a referendum.
Okay. All right. We're going to take that break, come back, and also talk about a few things. Corruption, folks. 5% for whistleblower?
You want to make that money, Jeff?
Yes. Yes.
Do you know
5%
someone?
of 100 billion.
That's good. But it's the proceeds. After the proceeds are recovered.
Yes, correct.
Then you
After.
get the 5%.
Okay. And also devolution. Talk about what, 35%?
35%.
What is it right now?
15%.
Okay. And also this whole report, does it exclude President Kenyatta from running?
For president, yes.
For president.
For prime minister, no.
You can run as MP.
Good point. Let's take a break. Come back. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is JKLIVE. What an interesting conversation. Breaking down the BBI. Jeff Koinange Live takes a break. We'll be back. Plenty more ahead. These guys are truly experts in this field. Back in a moment.